Kerry Bracco, first I'll talk to you a bit about our relationship. Sammy, like yourself, I had the privilege of coaching Kerry as an underage Bantam, then as a Bantam, and later in junior A hockey before he went on to give a kick at major junior, and he actually spent a lot of time coaching minor hockey and achieving great success, winning national championships at the midget AAA level. Kerry actually got involved being a general manager in the Western Hockey League with the Hitmen, and he has a knowledge of the inside operation of the Calgary Flames and the Hitmen and that relationship and the nuances of leadership that go on in an organization like that and how they function. The reason I wanted Kerry to come on is I believe, Kerry, that the quadrant of the city in Calgary that you were growing up in, and probably your parents, that parent group that administrated the Northeast Board, they were the most grounded group of adults that made it work and allowed me to coach in the manner I wanted. And they provided 100% support. And the success I had as a coach with you, I believe coaching in a pretty good technical way and a very good ethical way got the results. And you went on, I think, picking up some of that, but it wouldn't have been possible without your parenting and the leadership that happened to be around in our time. So, Kerry, you've spent some time. Jordan has gone over to you and shared ideas. Quite simply, I'm just going to throw out and let you get going, Kerry, as all of you work with associations, you work with coaches. The biggest problem is, why are they coaching? They're trying to win games and they shorten the bench and they really create problems when children grow up. They become entitled, and I think the problems that we're dealing with in a leadership case in Hockey Canada are not the fault of Hockey Canada or the Major Junior League. They're the fault of the system growing up that we are a part of influencing. So, Kerry, the big thing was you managed a bench so everybody felt valued, respected, trusted. Trust and respect were a big part of it, and accountability. And I'm going to begin with letting you talk a bit about your philosophy and how you picked it up and how you applied it. And Jordan, if you're able to chime in a few times, I have questions for you as well related to it, because following the advice of Kerry and managing the bench the way he suggested changed the way you could create a team culture and resulted in you winning provincial championships. So it's just a matter of how to lead ethically versus how to destroy as a coach. So, Kerry, go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, I was fairly privileged growing up in the area that I did grow up in. My father was pretty heavily involved in, and I call the organization of the systems of hockey that are in place today. And, he had some very basic philosophies that, I was brought up under and during. That era that Wally was so instrumental in the Northeast Athletic Association really started with the hockey schools that him and Donnie Phelps and a lot of us young kids were lucky enough to go to a hockey school that actually taught us stuff. And, from the ages 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, to get a real hockey school that would teach, I call it the basic principles of hockey, so that, a team could be put together and enjoyed. So, one of the luxuries I did have was going to those hockey schools. And then from there, I grew up in an organization where the administrators were smart enough to go find proper hockey people to run the hockey side. And the one thing I always respected my dad for is that him and his buddies would take care of all the organization, all the fundraising, and they would let people like Wally and Donnie run the hockey side. And I think it's become a big problem today because we don't have enough, I guess, quality, ethical hockey people kind of running the hockey side of the organizations. So after going through that my whole life and having, an awful lot of success on the ice, I absorbed different coaches. So I'm kind of a product of people like Wally and Donnie, and I had an interesting coach, and he was one of the funniest men I ever met, Jimmy Holden, and he was good for a lot of other reasons. So after taking all that into summation, I like to win, and I always believe that when we won at the minor levels and in the junior levels, it was directly related to how the teams were put together and how they were administrated and how they were coached. And I think you would all say that that's what's happened. The winning teams are usually properly operated. Well, I also looked at the teams that we should have won with and why we didn't win. And a lot of times the selection of the team and putting the team is usually the beginning of it. And I think that it's one of the most important parts when you sit down to put your team together, that you get background information and you find out about the kids. And that's easy to say, but everybody says they do it, but for some reason they don't go deep enough, in my opinion. So as I started coaching, my first coaching entity, the things that I believed that I could improve on from all the things that I'd learned were things like, high energy, work ethic, the same things everybody talks about, 4-line hockey. And so in the early 90s, the late 80s, I started to coach at a pretty young age. I got actually asked by actually a former baseball coach of mine, a guy named Dave Smith, whose son is Jason Smith, and he wanted me and my buddies to come and coach. And so that's how I started coaching. And in it all, I started Bantam AA. And what I really enjoyed was just going out, and I didn't really have any preconceived notions. I just went and began the coaching part. But what I found was that the most important thing that I learned was to create a team. And, creating those teams made the kids feel important. And in order for them to feel important, they have to play. And for a lot of the initial years and a lot of the championships that we won early, a lot of people would always say, how are you beating the 2-line teams? Because that's really what began a lot of it. It was 30 years ago, and most of the teams we were competing against, they would play all their stars, and it would be a 2-line program. We came in, me and my coaching staff, and we went to the 4-line program and managed the bench differently. But I think one of the most successful things was all the learning that I gained, from my peers, and then adding in a few different things, is that kids just want an opportunity, and you have to give them that opportunity, but you got to prepare them to be ready for that opportunity. And I think that when you get a group of kids together, when you make your final selections, they got to feel needed within their own team. It becomes their team. You're just kind of I always felt I was kind of the judge and the coach, but the kids need everybody to need them, and you have to figure out the best way to put that team together. So as I went on, and my first really big victory happened. I was 24 years old, and I was coaching the Calgary North Stars, and I was my first year coaching at that level, and we won the national championship. And all the philosophies and all the things that I believed came true that year, and all those philosophies were brought together from all the previous years of experiences. I also had the good fortune of, I grew up with a brother who was probably the best hockey player at my age bracket. And I was also a late bloomer, so I was totally different than him. And I also had the the opportunity to see and play, because I played defense and forward, and I played every imaginable role on a team. So, the team part of it is what I found to be the fun part about putting that together. Some of the biggest challenges I see today, having watched, so I coached up to, till the time my son started playing. I started coaching him, and I'm a little bit not disappointed, but just, it's been a tough, put it this way, it's been a tough 10 years to kind of not be able to make enough change or keep what was happening. Because I think in the 90s, there was this good thing that was starting to happen where kids were having a better experience than what they are today. And I watch what's happening at all the different levels and all the different things. And, some of it's good, some of it's bad. But the bench management in grassroots hockey is something that's really got to have, people have got to start having a look at, because kids aren't having a good experience. And to me, the 4-line program and treating kids equally, making them accountable to each other, I don't know, it just needs to improve. Well, just hold on a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll turn. I'm on now.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to do it again, Michael. Listen, to simplify what he's saying is, all coaches do today is shorten the bench. I watched the National under 18 team. Women play last night. They managed the bench very well. They played very well, but when the game got tight, there were about 4 players that never got shifts in the third period, and that's a development competition. So if you're coaching to win and you think shortening the bench to win is the right way to go, you've got to look at why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and ask yourself some questions. Because in my mind, and Michael, you can tell me differently, when you watch teams there, and you maybe look in the mirror yourself, are you inclined to throw the best players out more often versus giving other people an opportunity to develop and face those challenges and grow and believe in themselves? So, Mike, it's quite simple. Is shortening the bench a problem in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it right now. I work with the little brick kids, the 2000, well, it's crazy, right? 2013 year of birth.
Yes.
2014, 15. And it's unbelievable how I not only, to your point, is that it's happening, but that parents allow it to happen. Like that parents actually, the ones that are in these ecosystems of that level, don't feel like they have a voice, like don't feel like they have an opportunity to, because they think that somebody's going to take an opportunity away from them, from their 8 and 9-year-old, and they're not going to progress. So it's certainly, I mean, I think it's a problem in the U.S. I mean, it was funny. I was in Norway for 3 weeks talking with a couple of big clubs there, and forever, the U.S. has been following the Norwegian, Scandinavian, Finnish, Swedish model, and they're starting to creep in to select teams and trying to, they have a great culture there where they don't do any cuts until kids are 14 years old. So there's no, like you could have a 2007 team now, last year, 2 years ago, with 40 kids, 50 kids on it, and they find ways to get everybody an opportunity to play, and they're moving away from that. But that's actually the reason for their success and for the abilities they have. So I think what we do in the U.S. and Canada is, I honestly think we just take advantage of the fact that we have so many kids playing, that the ones that don't, like the carnage we leave behind from the kids that make it, doesn't really affect these organizations and the people running them.
See, the thing I find interesting is, over the years of having this success, the 4-line program was beating the 2-line program.
Right.
And we started to make inroads. And now, like, as I watch my son go through it, I see it reverting back. And that concerns me. And why that would be happening if, in the early and the mid and the late 90s, we were making inroads with 4-line programs. Most teams that do win, at every level today are 4-line programs.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some, power plays and that sort of stuff, but in the grassroots, and I don't know why we started to fall back. A lot has to do with the ego of, at a younger age now, of kids and parents, how kids are being selected, in Calgary specific, I can say is that the last 20 years, I've watched us narrow down the kids' abilities, at age 6, when that never used to happen until it was 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And it's created the funnel is not wide enough at the bottom, and it creates the elitism and the egoism and the expensism that's happening today.
Well, Kerry, I'm going to ask Jordan, the method of coaching, you and I had the same method. Mine was simple. I just rolled the lines. I had 4 lines, rolled them. Won a national female championship with 2 Olympians, defeating a team which I believe had 9, rolling the lines. And I'm not suggesting everybody does that. It just happened. I regarded my club team as a development team for the national team. Everybody was a candidate. The outcome wasn't really about winning the national championship. It was developing everybody. And by everybody feeling good about themselves, they won the national championship. It's that simple. So when I mentor, I just encourage coaches to transmit belief, play everybody, find roles for them, make it work. And Jordan, I'd like you now to maybe comment on your experience having worked with me over time in the Bantam AAA girls level, moving up to the midget AA girls that you worked with, and meeting Kerry and how it might have changed your approach.
Okay, Wally. Well, thanks. What I was looking at was the going back to those Bantam days you reminded me of was we only had 9 forwards and 6D in those days, and so it was fairly easy to roll 3 lines in that program. But at that point, Kerry, and I know you'd find this not surprising, there were parents that felt that that wasn't the right way to do it.
Yeah, I know.
And so it was 2 years with that program where it was same philosophy of getting everybody to play in all situations, and we went to won 1 provincial title and lost the provincial title in 2 overtime games in the second year. But with a team, the second year's team was a team that the parents had very low expectations for, but because they came together as a team, they did exceptionally well. And it's interesting that there's several players off of that team that are currently playing NCAA right now, and one was over playing for Team China in the Olympics this last go round. So then back involved with the midget or U18 programs. Same thing, looking for all players to play in all situations, and took some heat on it with the AAA group, and because of course everyone can do the math and divide 60 by the number of lines you're going with, the 60 minutes, but when you talk about equitable versus equal ice, their view of equitable changes, and so that was always a struggle in communicating the importance of the 4-line program. This year with the U18 AA, we're only allowed 11 forwards, 19 players, so 11 forwards is typically what the teams take, and the real obvious one that many programs took on was they just get their 3 best players out there more often, and they go with pairings and then have their 3 best players rotate through, whether they're all in the wing or whether they're in the middle, usually centers, and that piece. And so in looking at the challenge of what to do with 11-player rotation, I was talking with you, Wally, and you suggested that I get a hold of Kerry, because you said Kerry has a rotation that works, has worked for him in the past, but he said I don't necessarily understand it as good as talking to Kerry, and so I gave you a call, Kerry, and spent 3 hours on the phone. It was meant to be a short conversation, but of course, when you get hockey people talking, away we went. And it was a great conversation going into the real in-depth portion of it, understanding not only how the rotation worked, but what you were looking at for chemistry and lines and that sort of piece. And that's where this rotation works most, is that chemistry piece, as well as that building team piece. And I think that it took a little while. The kids understood exactly what we were trying to do first, of course. And then it took a little while for their parents to catch up. And once their parents caught up and saw the success that we were having with it, and seeing that their child was getting every opportunity to develop in all situations, it was accepted by the vast majority. I'm not going to say everyone, because I did have one parent that was questioning it, and fortunately I had a strong director that helped me out with that situation. And long story a little bit longer was we got into the championship game at provincials, and at the end of the first period we were tied. It was a tie game, and I looked over at my assistant coaches, and they were, one was in her second year of assistant coaching and one was in her first, and so I could tell that their anxiety was up there a little bit. And I just said to them, I said, we got them right where we want them. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, they're already shortened their bench down to 2 lines. I said, we roll our 4. I said, they won't keep up to us. And sure enough, we took a lead in the second and walked away a bit with it in the third. They had no pushback left. And so fortunate enough to win a provincial title, and be able to transmit the belief, as Wally said, by having all 4 lines rolling and contributing in a great way. So it turned out to be a really good season. Going back to what another piece that you said there, Kerry, was that the whole idea of creating team. And I said it to them right off the start, that the difference between this being a regular season and being a special season that you remember forever is how you come together and how you come together as a group. And it was funny how many kids echoed that back to me at the end of the year, that you said that this could be a special season if we came together. And they said it truly was. And so that was a good piece with that. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to the conversation that you and I had, Kerry, recently about turnovers. And
Jordan, I wanted to interrupt you because when you were talking about the support of that board member and the situation where you were confronted by a parent who didn't really think you were doing the right thing, Perry, this story nails the problem. Jordan, could you share it with us, please?
Well, it was a parent that decided to send me an email concerned with not only the rotation that we were using, but our actual line combinations. And the parent sent me a scouting report of all of my forward players, including his own daughter, and that. And so it was something that, as soon as it came to me, I just forwarded it directly to my director and said, could you please reach out to this parent, because if I do, it won't end well. And so what she did was she called me, of course, and asked, and she goes, this person obviously has never had had a child in an elite program before, and I said, oh no, he has a son that's playing U18 AAA or has played U18 AAA. And she goes, really? And so she got on the phone with that parent and had that same conversation and kind of said to him, I said, obviously you haven't had other children in playing elite stream. And he explained, yes, that he'd had one. And she goes, well, she said, would you have sent this type of email to your son's coach? And he said, well, no. And she said, well, why is it appropriate to send it to your daughter's coach? And so there was silence at the other end of the line.
I had a player, he was a pro, and he went to play in the NCAA, and his dad did that continuously, like even in the NCAA, and I wanted to bring him to Salzburg. But the American guy phoned his friend coaching in one of the colleges in the States. He said, no, you don't want to, this guy's a privileged kid and all that. And the kid was good himself, but his dad was doing the same thing to NCAA Div 1 thing. Then I helped the kid get a contract in Finland, and his dad was doing the same. He was phoning the coach about line combinations and what his son should be doing, and basically got the kid banned from pro hockey because his dad was such a pain in the ass. So it doesn't just end in midget AAA. So go ahead, sorry.
Well, I want to get back to Carrie here. And just to ask you, Carrie, have you ever had to confront a parent and been able to do so with success, or did you have support with you, behind you, beside you, that would sort of control the environment for you to operate the way you wanted?
Well, I've always had, the board of directors, once they hire you, I guess maybe it's my personality or whatever it is. Most parents that I've dealt with, is as long as their kids are getting played and getting opportunity and getting taught and getting developed and you're winning, you really don't have a lot of problems. And so the problems usually come from the 3 to 4 parents whose kids didn't make the team. I've had more problems there where they, think you've made a wrong decision for the betterment of the team and whatnot. And they've caused me more grief and our team more grief than anything. And Wally, I think of a couple situations that you got to see, but most of the parents at the start, I'm very clear with them the opportunity that's going to be presented to their kids. They're on the team. They made the team for the reasons that they have assets. All that is, and it's pretty simple. Their job is to come and be a part of the team, work hard, listen, and be disciplined. They will play and get equal opportunity to the point where, unless they choose to not be accountable to their peers. And so I think, parents have really got to be communicated to at the start in a very blunt fashion to say, it's not your fault or my fault if they're not getting the same amount of ice time. They've probably not worked hard or they probably haven't listened. So I guess it's the clarity that has saved me any problems in that fashion. But I will say this, the one year we were going to the national championships, a board of director tried to step in and meddle, and I had to get the president to get him out of the situation because there's always going to be something that comes up. But I really haven't had very many problems when you're winning and everybody's feeling a part of it, and you don't have problems. That's probably the only way to keep the parents off your back.
Carrie, I want to mention a story, then I want to go to Sammy with an observation. I was mentoring the Northeast Association a few years ago when Carrie had applied to coach with the midget AAA team. I was a part of the interview group with every coaching candidate. Kerry was one of them. His interview was by far the very best, just unbelievable, comparatively speaking. And I was involved sitting with the board, made that observation, but the decision was going to be theirs. And the president said that it would be impossible to hire Kerry because there was a mother on the board that didn't like him. And her daughter, in my mind, the particular son might not have made the team because of that. And the mother was probably on the board because of that, to make sure her son got on the team. So Kerry didn't get the job, and Kerry can't get a job today because of that. The philosophy is you're going to be influenced, you're going to be pressured. And if you stick by your beliefs, you'll be successful, but you may not get jobs anymore today. So Sammy, I'm just curious here. He's worked on the male side, but Kerry did take on I don't know, it would be a midget A girls team in Carroll's Hockey Calgary. And he had one conclusion after the first practice. They just wanted to have fun. So he changed his practice routine, and it became all fun. A lot of games, small area games. So, Sammy, your experience, we're talking guys hockey. Does the same go on in girls hockey, or you've got your daughters in it now?
Yeah, so thanks, Wally, and thanks, Kerry. I mean, I don't think when we're having this conversation about minor hockey, there's really that many differences. And what it really comes down to is having a caring coach, and I find that that's what's hard living in the GTA, is getting swept up in everything. Our daughter's only 7, and Billy, my husband, and I just signed up for our first coaching job to coach their U9 house league team. And, for me, that's always been my philosophy at camp, is have fun and just make it about, if these girls are involved in hockey in some way when they're in their 30s and 40s, then great. But last year we didn't have a great experience in her kind of first year, and it was already super serious, and there were super sixes who were playing 4 or 5 times a week, and she didn't love it. And that's hard to see right away, So we want to try to give her one good year of experience. But I mean, it's hard, Kerry, when you're talking to the converted here. Obviously, everybody on this call has a certain philosophy and follows sort of Wally's passions. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what can we do in the game that are already doing what we can with our own teams, but how can hockey change? And, what I think when we talk about, the good of the game and the best for the kids and all of this, but, we can only influence really one team and our team. But how do you think overall the whole system can change, or can it? Does it just need to be overhauled, and does all of hockey really need to change?
Well, that's a big question. And of course, Wally and I debate it all the time, because you try and make positive change. I think, I don't like to point fingers, but our leadership group, and of course, Hockey Canada is going through a lot of challenges. Hockey Alberta is going through challenge. Everybody in Canada is going through challenges because of other reasons, but some of the underlying real problems that we're having aren't being addressed. And when I say that, I mean, the game's expense is getting out of control. The 365-day a year hockey mentality is collapsing the enthusiasm. I see ethically good hockey people being pushed out of all organizations. And that's a problem, because I just go back to when, it was that same little model where, the parent group, because you need parents. Like we operate a volunteer taxpayer system with over 500,000 kids. The sports schools have gained a lot of notoriety because the minor system, in my mind, has gotten, I guess, overloaded with agendas. And I think, in a nutshell, we have to find a way at the top level to get the grassroots to become not 1% of the thought. It needs to be, because I always look at Hockey Canada and they deal with the 1% all the time. But the grassroots is really everybody else. And Hockey Canada's got an immense amount of information and knowledge that it's accumulated, but for some reason, it never gets filtered into the areas it needs. If I was to do it over with my own kids today, I would make sure that the president of the organization was somebody that I knew deep down, that believed in what you do, Sammy. So as you go through this, it's so frustrating because to make changes at every single level, it might never happen. The only thing you can really control is if you have a president like, I'm going to say my dad, who had ethics, but not as much hockey knowledge. So he found the hockey knowledge to make it work. I think there's a big challenge because we need the volunteers to have the process run. But a lot of those volunteers, because of the workloads and everything else, I'm finding that the agendas of themselves and their own beliefs are overriding the complete group. So if I had any words of wisdom to you and your husband, the president of every organization is vital, because he's got to have a mission statement that is similar to what we talk about. And if he doesn't, you're just wasting your time. And I've watched it in 3 organizations, and I've tried to help from the coaching perspective, but they don't want, they don't want that. They just want, and of course Calgary, and I imagine Toronto is good. There's so many kids. Like, I don't even know how you guys handle it, but how do we change it is a big question. But I think it should be something that Hockey Canada puts on the forefront to find out why are kids and people not having the same experiences that they should. Like, that should be the number one question.
Kerry, I'd like to interrupt because I believe what you're saying is the problem. The responsibility rests with the governing body of every sport, not just Hockey Canada and hockey. It'd be basketball, soccer, in the States, you name it. And if they don't begin with understanding what their role is and why they're doing what they're doing, and that's where the mission statement exercise come in. And Sammy, I need your help here. Hockey Canada is in a bit of a kerfuffle over the legal matters they're facing because of World Junior behaviors. And those behaviors start in minor hockey when those kids were growing up and becoming stars at 8 years old, 10 years old, 14. And I think the system can create entitled behaviors. And we have to address that at the top. So, Sammy, if you know any female, I recommend female board member. I'm advocating Hockey Canada mandate the exercise at every coaching level, and I can't get through to anybody who will even talk about it. And now the timing's perfect. They've got themselves in hot water. They've had funding withdrawals. They had legal proceedings. And I said, here is a proactive way of dealing with these issues at the grassroots level, from the bottom up, every course conductor level, every certification level, you educate them about ethical coaching. And last week, Tim Bothwell mentioned every association has a technical director. He said they need an ethical coaching director. That's very important. And I think in keeping with that certification education for coaches, they can educate the parents of the young kids and the kids about what the right way is. And all about earning ice time, proper behaviors, respect and trust, teamwork, learning, developing those values. So, Sammy, I'm going to leave it with you in terms of your contacts with those in a political position to listen and suggest this should be incorporated. I've asked.
Well, Wally, I can tell you that the people that I know that applied for the board, some really qualified candidates didn't get on that board, and the board is filled with lawyers. So likelihood of getting any leeway with them is going to be very minimal. People are not listening to what needs to be changed, and I don't know how you get that across. I mean, it's unfortunate because it will be the end for, I think, a lot of people.
Would it have any merit? Like, I just go back to some of the things that I was involved in. Like, you need almost an outside group who've been in the grassroots to become a major part of the leadership of Hockey Canada. And what I'm talking about is a lot of the people, the philosophies that are on this aren't being listened to. And so how do you?
I was very when we had the U18 coach come on from University of Alberta, I was very that was really positive because I felt like the changes within at least the women's program, things seem to have changed within the culture there. So that's one small aspect. But I know when they tried to put out a statement, Hockey Canada wouldn't allow it to not pass by their own lawyers, so it had to be a very watered down statement. And I think that that's sort of happening at every level. So yeah, you're right, Carrie. You're so right. But how do you, without it becoming your full-time job, without it becoming, you're right, this is a volunteer organization. So there would be some incredibly great people, and not to say the people there are not great, but
no, that's what I'm saying.
That, they've gone down a certain path, and it's hard to recover. It's hard to get back and steer the ship, So I don't know what the solution is, but yes, I think an outside sort of voice of reason, a Wally Kozak, for instance. But if they're not even answering his call, how do you get the message across?
Well, I will tell you one of the interesting things I was involved in 2000, the Flames were close to leaving the city. And the ownership was smart enough to let a group of outsiders, and they listened to them because they were concerns that they were going to leave. And the reason I say it, and today the success of the Flames comes from, and I was a part of the group that was, it was a volunteer group, but we were also ticket holders, we were hockey people, we were business people all the way through. And having Hockey Canada here in Calgary, you wouldn't believe how distant that upper echelon is from the realities of what are happening in their own system. And, it's been frustrating to watch. But anyways, with that Flames, what really made it work was, first of all, they asked this group to be a major part of the strategy of overhauling. And so if anybody can get to that upper echelon, whoever becomes that king, whoever that becomes, I would strongly suggest that you find, 15 to 20 people across Canada, the people that have been in the, and I call it's the grassroots, but basically They're the people that are starting, just like you, Sammy, with kids in the program, where fundraising becomes a big issue. Development's a big issue. There's hundreds of good people and ethical people that have been fighting this battle, and we just never seem to get there. And so it's just a comment I wanted to make that.
I'm going to relate this. I don't know if our American friends have been through this in a similar way at all, but I certainly have. Sammy, when Kerry was talking about Hockey Canada, the leaders that were owners at the time, Hockey Canada was the national team, basically sponsored by the Flames ownership group, creating a center of excellence out of the Saddle Dome, where Dave King created coaching education. There, the owners of the Flames said, your job in the center of excellence and their contribution voluntarily through their Flames organization was coach development. And that's the group where we created the mission statement exercise with. And we had it written, produced in a video state. And when Dave left Hockey Canada, Hockey Canada was taken over by the CAHA, the board led, the lawyer board led. I don't mean generalizing here, but we're saying a different kind of leadership group, unlike the Flames and the Center of Excellence originally started, where the mission statement exercise was the foundational priority. So when the Hockey Canada name went over to the CAHA, they lost this ethical piece, and they got into nothing but the technical. They went from one center of excellence to 5 regional, and I think it's become, like Gary said, they deal with the top 1%. They're really concerned with the championships they're going to win, the worlds, the juniors, the women's, you name it. There's a lot of money involved, and I think that's the nature of the beast. So I don't know whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic just listening to this entire talk. Now, Kim, in your area, does this make sense at all, or can you connect at your minor hockey level with the problems going up the ladder that we face at the end?
I don't know. I think Mike would probably be better positioned to answer the question, because he's covers a little wider area, and he's been involved at the organization level more than I have been. I mean, it's there are some issues. I just don't know if they're as widespread as like what Sammy Joe was referring to with the Toronto area. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, well, there's actually a really strong movement in the U.S. here to actually there's a big group right now that's trying to peel off of USA Hockey and run their own organization, because at the end of the day they ask, well, what does USA Hockey do for the minor hockey associations? And the reality is it doesn't do enough, right? So if you're an organization that can put 20 or 30 ice rinks or organizations together and have that kind of voting power, that number of individuals, then you can make change. Now, unfortunately, the way the change is, it's not good. It's worse change. It's like, 8U full ice. It's more tournaments, more costs, more specialization. But the idea of it, I think, comes from, if you're Hockey Canada. I mean, one thing we don't have, I don't think, in North America is as strong a federation control as you do in Europe and you do in Scandinavia. I mean, you look at those federations there, they really control what can happen at certain levels much more than we can. And I guess some people might think that's a bad thing, because we all want our independence But if it means for the good of the game and it means for the good of the players and the children, I think it's just a matter of a strong group being able to say, well, why do we need this governing body? Because what does that governing body really do for my 8-year-old? Nothing. I mean, so.
Yeah.
And
And to
that's
follow up,
that's
on what Mike was saying, so that organization that he's referring to owns the rink where I coach, owns almost all of the rinks that our club team will play at this year, and also owns or controls the organization, the team. So we no longer have a local board. We don't have an organization president. We don't. So that's all changed in changed as of last year for us. So and the other thing is I'm coaching, and my experience is at the tier 2 youth level. I'm sure it's a little more intense at the tier 1 AAA level, and there's a number of AAA teams in the area, and things are really quite a state of flux in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast region because of what Mike described. And that's probably why I kicked the question over to you first, Mike.
Well, if I can say just another thing based on what has been said, is that in 1996, I went at the Calgary Flames to create a universal program called Hockey Calgary that would fund to help lower the cost, build more rinks, basically add more development and coaching, use the 50-50 money to go directly to the grassroots. Yeah. We had the Flames here for 20 years, and they'd been very, very philanthropic, and they're outstanding, but none of the money ever made it to the grassroots. So we made headway. They started the 50-50. Then in 2000, we created, the foundation was there. All of a sudden, we created a poker tournament. We created all this stuff to raise money. See, the NHL has got such power to generate money. And, I always believe that the Saddle Dome could create the money that could be put into the grassroots so that we could get proper things done, by lowering the cost, building more rinks. And it was very successful to the point where, I think it's close to, $1.5 million now of money goes directly into our grassroots. The challenge now is to utilize that money properly. Because then it becomes a whole nother, yeah. And so where my only disconnect was I wanted to do the fundraising, because fundraising is tough, like in all aspects of hockey. So it's either coming out of the parents' pocket or you're going to fundraise. And I know down in the States to play hockey, it's a lot more expensive than it is in Canada. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, but it's self-imposed, right? So if I was a business, and I work with organizations around the world now, right? And I work with a lot of youth owners, rink owners of 2 sheet facilities, 1 sheet facilities, whatever it is. And what I try to do is come at them from a financial standpoint. If you want to make more money, if it's all about just money, you want to make more money, then the way you're doing it is not the way to do it. By developing kids that go to other people's rinks and spend money somewhere else is not the way you make money. The way you make money is you build an organization within your organization, that every kid that comes into your building spends money in your pro shop, in your snack bar, in your concessions, in your 50-50s, like on your uniforms. Like, so to me, it's such an odd thing where as the programs get bigger and better, the opportunity gets less and less. So what we're doing in the U.S. is we're squeezing out all this talk about diversity and inclusion and access. We're actually squeezing that out of the real possibilities. We do a lot of things that are great. I mean, I did a work for Ronald McDonald House with the New York Rangers that past weekend. Unbelievable. Great opportunity. Kids had fun. But really, at the end of the day, that's just we're just kicking the can down the road. So, okay, we introduce 100 new kids to hockey at 6 years old. Well, what do they do? So their next step is from free to $5,000 a year. That's what we've done. That's what we created. And instead of creating an atmosphere of, hockey is for everyone, and you don't need to travel across town to play the same competition you have in your own building. To me, it's just an odd business model. If the business model was to put 700 people in your building playing hockey, I would want to keep them all in my building.
So Wally can attest to this, that the programs that he was involved in his early days were exactly what you're talking about. And so we've gone off track in Canada, and travel has become monumental, as has, what people want. But when I talk about the money aspect of it, I always believe that if the Flames could generate money that could go back into the grassroots, there's two parts of it. You can't have the grassroots wasting the money. So travel is the biggest waste of money when it gets right down to it. But how do you address that unless you control the money or control the organizations? So, in essence, my belief years ago was that if we could generate enough money, we could then have a board divvy it out and say, okay, at the community level, we need more money put into coaching, into rec facilities, and that sort of thing. And it's been a tough thing to go, but I don't know if this is happening in the States, but in Alberta, the 50-50 money and the progressive money that is being raised today is in the millions. And I mean, it is high, lots of money. But I can also tell you, in 1991, the first team I coached that won a national championship, it cost $575 to be a part of the Northeast. 6 years later, it cost $695 with the Royals, and we went to the national championship. 6 years later, it went to $750. So it was under $1,000 to participate in the volunteer taxpayer system at the highest level for 13 years. From 2003, though, to today, it's gone from under 1,000 to 10,000, probably plus.
Yeah.
Because your individual skill developers are costing lots of money. And in order to play in some of these teams, the pressures and that sort of thing. So what I'm getting at is, for some reason in the last 20 years, the financial part of how much it costs to play has just gone out of control.
Kerry, I wanted to, some people have put their hand up here. Jordan hasn't had his hand up for quite a while. Jordan and then Mike. Jordan?
Well, thanks, Wally. I was gladly listening to what Kerry's saying, because it ties into what I would like to share as well. Kerry, actually, Hockey Alberta and the Edmonton Oilers just announced, because of course they've had those huge 50-50s in their runs, that a whole bunch of money is going to grassroots to help people pay for fees and those sorts of things. So that hopefully will be a bit of a benefit. But where this all comes back to is, I was thinking about it as we're sitting there. Wally's talking about the ethical coaching and the need for that, and everybody's talking about how the game is getting so expensive. Well, it's anything I've found that where you attach the word elite to, usually becomes elitist. And our sport has gotten to the point, and I agree with you, Kerry, that the cost has gotten to such a price point that it's priced a lot of people out of it. And as Mike mentioned, you can do all the things that you want to try and bring new populations into the game. If they can't afford it after the first year, what sense did it make? Who does it make feel better? It makes the people who are putting the money into it and that program feel good about what they're doing. But if there's no follow-up, then it doesn't accomplish what you really are setting out to do. And I really feel that if we want our school that's next week, our game to be as diverse as it possibly can and grow, we have to provide opportunities for the underrepresented populations. And in some associations, that's still female. In most associations, that's a diverse population of our communities. Calgary has the quadrant system, and as you know, Carrie being from the Northeast has become a pretty big quadrant to be able to get the numbers of kids balanced with other quadrants in the city. And
there's actually an easy way to fix that, but will people listen?
no.
But if you were funding it through
yeah.
a charitable donation, you might be able to say, okay, we'll give you the money, but you got to make these boundaries change in a fashion that is equitable to everybody.
And I've also said this because circling fully back to where we started about 4-line teams. If you look at the teams and you go, okay, so if these teams are only using 2 and bits of 3 lines, why do they take 20 players? Well, they take 20 players because a 58-seat bus or an hour of ice divides nicer out of 20 parents' pocket or 20 families' pockets than it would out of 15. Yeah. So it's that kid that's sitting on the bench who's paying a hell of a lot more for their ice time than the kid that's getting to play all the time. So you're probably, even up here, you're looking at that $6.50 a minute model that Dom's talking about in California, and that's with everybody playing. So it's I don't know, it's a great conversation. But I think to get to the bottom of this entitlement and that piece, it's going to take people, like-minded individuals that are going to dedicate their time and people to actually listen to them.
Jordan, I'm going to ask Michael. You had your hand up, Michael, so go ahead.
Yeah, no. It was just like it's just when you look at the issue, it really isn't a unsolvable issue. It's a matter of just willpower, right? It's a matter of saying, like, how is it that if the NHL wants to grow fans, and if they really want to grow the game, and they want to make it diverse, and they want to give all opportunity to any child to play, male, female, black, white, whatever it is, then you would think they would take more control over these facilities. I mean, these facilities in towns in all of North America are really not that expensive when you look at the grand scheme of you do the numbers. If you keep 1,000 kids in your rink playing hockey, there's no issue funding a facility, none. And it's a matter of saying, well, so why can't, and then like on my side with USA Hockey, then you need to be much more forceful in saying that this is the requirements you're under. Like in USA Hockey, you're supposed to be, every organization, when you sign up your charter and you're playing youth hockey, it's supposed to be a 501c3, which means it's a nonprofit organization. That's in the bylaws of why you join this tax-free organization. The fact is, some of these organizations have millions of dollars in their coffers, and they spend it on the top elite players, and it doesn't go towards the core mission. And to Wally's point, and we bring up the mission statement a lot, but it does come down to the core mission of your organization. So either you need to remove that organization from this big governing body, or the governing body has to start enforcing its own rules. And therefore, I think it would help build more grassroots hockey, because somebody would start seeing that, well, we must do this in order to get the benefits of this.
Michael, I think that we had a system sort of like that in Canada for a while with the community center based programs.
Yeah, we did.
And that the catchments, you tried out for the AA team, and if you didn't make it, then you were on the single A, and you're in that catchment. And I think, what went wrong is exactly, excuse me, what you've been talking about. And there was people doing it for the wrong reasons. And so then people said, well, there shouldn't be dividing lines. You should be able to go to a different center. You should be able to go play where your kid wants to play, for good or bad reasons. I mean, sorry, I seem to be coughing right at this moment. Yeah. Something is going on with your child. You don't want them to be around a coach, or you think that your kid is going to the NHL.
Yeah, the free
I'll be coughing.
the free enterprise part is no, I'm not against that. Listen, I'm all for it. I've come from organizations. I built a program down here called the Snapple Express, which was probably it's the largest program on the Northeast. I mean, it was a lot of money, and there was a lot of really good hockey players that came through it. But there's room for all the other stuff as well. And what we don't have the right people in these positions of power that continue to it's almost like when it's any board that I work with, right? It's usually the board members are there because their kids are the best kids on the teams. And then and then in a year or two, their kids migrate out. I mean, I've been with boards that are running boards of youth hockey programs, and their kid's not even in the program anymore because they said, oh no, this program's not good enough for us. We need to go to an elite team. I said, then you got to get out of the board. Like, you can't be dictating what everyone else is doing when you don't even think this is good enough for your own child. So, and I think that we've all had that. I mean, in every community, you've had a community builds a. That's why I love going to Norway, and you come in. Like, I was just in Kristiansand last week. You come in, it's a town rink, it's the community rink, beautiful, it's clean. Everyone is a full-time employee. Any kid in the community can play hockey. You can get all the equipment you want at any time of the day, and they work with the handball club and the soccer club and the badminton club and everything, and it's just, and maybe because there's less children and less eyes to go after, they're probably more concerned with making it more accessible and fun because they can't afford to lose anybody. And I think we get very fat because we can afford to lose as many kids as we want. There's another group of kids that will come right in and fill the void.
Mike, I want to mention to Gary before I get him to speak. Your title, and Gary and Sammy, Tom, Tim, Hockey Solutions Architect is what is on his title. And so Gary, he's dealt with these things at a different level in a different way. And I want to thank you, Mike, for your input. Kerry, you were waving your hand. Go ahead.
Well, on two things. Specifically, for some reason in hockey in North America, and I've felt it over the years, is that the higher level would pay less respect for the next level or the next level or the next level. And we've never really found a way to work together the way we should, both financially and development wise. Sammy Joe, we need a queen or a king of Hockey Canada to have, the mindset of the people that are sitting right here. How to make that happen, I'm not sure how that can happen, but it should happen if we want to grow the sport. If the NHL wants to grow the sport in North America, they should be the major funding of our programs. And, I say this to the NHL and Gary Bettman. Gary Bettman comes into town and does all of his stuff, and, but ironically doesn't really understand the grassroots of growing the sport. And, what happens in Calgary and Edmonton, we've had to push the envelope to get more money to the development system. But the funny part about it is the hockey players all come from the grassroots. Every player that plays in the NHL, I've often believed that they should be allowed, 5 to 10% of their wages off their taxes to go back into the programs to fund so that you could have universal hockey being played in rinks like Norway and that sort of thing. And that's a big idea. But, in the NHL, the player cards, the amount of money that it generates is off the charts. And these are all kind of ideas, but at the end of the day, money is starting to rule the competitiveness of our leagues, which is a big problem.
Kerry,
yeah.
I want to relate, Sammy, your original question to Kerry was, what can we do? And I believe, after listening to everyone talk, the people with the most money are ready and the timing is right for them. And Mike, you would answer this question. You work with the New York Rangers. How much are they willing to invest in the good of the game? And I'm not saying that a percentage of the player's salary contribute, although they could. But if the NHL as an organization takes an ethical role in leading the game, everybody else will follow. Because as far as I'm concerned, in the NHL, players get more balanced ice time than in minor hockey.
Yeah.
And that's the essence of the problem. And they're trying to win a Stanley Cup. Yet in minor hockey, we're destroying the self-esteem of kids. They're getting mentally tough, coping with it, and quitting. So I'm trying to think of who do I go to, who can I turn to, who can I get to speak that will listen and try this exercise, which every player is going to be a coach. Every coach is going to start at the grassroots and get up to a higher level. And if you educate them, it's leadership. We're talking about leadership here, not just hockey, but whether it's corporate leadership, sports leadership, it relates. Tim, you had your hand up. You put it down?
Yeah, I had a question, but I didn't want to take it in a little different direction. So I guess Mike, you were talking about, you used to figure 1,000 players, the money be no object kind of thing. And I just did like a quick look at the rinks in our local area. And we have in the Philadelphia suburban area, there's plenty of places to play hockey. Families that play at our local rink could easily play at 3 or maybe even 4 other rinks if they wanted to. And we've got rinks that have anywhere from 8 to 13 teams total in the 10U to 18U range. I didn't look at the might. So I was curious what the Carrie, like in your area, what would be like the number of teams playing out of a rink? And Mike, same for you. Are those numbers I just rated different up where you are, or?
Well, in our neck of the woods, one of the things in Canada, we only got 36 million people, and our per capita rinks is off the charts. I think the Americans, and you guys have done a really good job of building more rinks, which could create more opportunities. The more rinks you guys build, I've heard the stories of Dallas, and I've heard the stories where you guys are at, and Canada has always had rinks, and like based on the per capita, like we might have 10 rinks in one quarter of our city. Calgary's 1.3 million, and I think there's 50 ice surfaces. So we have, and we still need more because the amounts of kids that want to play. But you watch. I mean, the numbers have actually haven't grown in the last, I believe it's 10 years. Is that fair to say? I think we're going backwards. But so when I talk about funding, it's all the extracurricular stuff that money's going to, that's taken the cost up quite a bit.
Yeah, I know from our point of view, like back to Wally, the NHL they have a thing called the International Growth Fund money. So every NHL team the NHL contributes to every NHL team. They give, don't hold me to this, but I think it's around $5 million per team. And they have that ability to go out and and it's all for grassroots programming. They can't pay for salaries. It can't pay for, Pittsburgh Penguins used it to build a bunch of deck hockey rinks, that probably cost $150,000, $160,000 each just to put the rink up, right? So all and in my work I do with the Rangers, Islanders, Pittsburgh, even the Panthers, all of that work is all from the IGF. So any outreach we do, I mean, the Rangers probably are one of the best from like a grassroots learn to play program. I mean, they probably have over 800 players playing in their learn to play and then their rookie leagues, and they have a, they've really followed the NHL model of this 10U. It'd be actually great to have Matt Herr on one day. Matt played at Michigan and played in the NHL and now he's with the NHL learn to play program. He leads that, and he's just one. He's come through USA Hockey, and somebody that understands that we can take this money. I just don't think at the end of the day we invest it the most efficiently. And there's a lot of waste. And from my point of view, I usually use the analogy, if you're a caterer, if you're my family are caterers. Like, so I come from my mother was a wedding caterer. And if you went to a wedding and you're a guest, you probably just see a good wedding. You're like, oh, here's the food. It's hot. The music's good. The bar is set up in the right place. Everybody came out on time. But if you're a caterer and you go to another caterer's wedding, you see all the little things like, oh, that plate wasn't really done properly, or the bar is not set up efficiently, or I can't believe they ran out of shrimp. Like, how did not know? Most people don't see that. And so I come from a perspective that I can, unfortunately, when I'm in these programs and I'm in these rinks, I'm seeing all of the inefficient pieces of what they do. And most parents just don't know. Like, they don't know any different. Like, they don't know that one coach to 27 kids in the corner of a rink is bad. Like that's not very efficient. Or they don't realize that, doing flow drills with 6-year-olds, and they think that their kid's supposed to be doing, 25 push-ups for not listening and paying attention at 6. They're like, I don't know. It seems right. This is supposed to be tough and it's supposed to be sport, right? So I think from my perspective, I've definitely over the last couple of years, I've tried to lay off the judging so much and just been more like, well, can I help you here? Or can we tweak this? Or can we make this a little bit better? And I think that's where the NHL can make the biggest impact. No doubt they have the money, but sometimes you need the money, and then you need not only the enthusiasm, right, but the right person in place to make it the most efficient use of the money, or else it feels good. It's very, I'm sure it's very therapeutic for them to say, oh, here's your everyone got $5 million. You get $5 million. You get $5 million. But what are they really doing on the return on that investment? And that's where I think we really have done a poor job, in my opinion.
One of the interesting things that dealing with the NHL owners here, that and I go back to 2000, they love the idea of the 50-50, and it's just a self-made lotto is what it was and still is. And Alberta's full of these lottos now that are directed the money in the right place. But the first 20 years of the NHL, it was their money being put into the grassroots. The second 20 years, it's the fans and it's the sponsors. So they really like the transition from not being out of their pocket into the fans, because it really, when somebody walks in the rinks and they buy the 50-50, that's the self, that's the lotto that's kind of created the money. What would be unbelievable is if the NHL would match dollar for dollar. But then what you just said is the biggest problem. How do you, and I always go to the 4 C's of hockey. You want to make it good competition at every level for all the kids. You want to make it convenient. You want to make it cost efficient, and you should just run it with common sense. Now, those 4 C's have been kind of Canada's challenge, is to continue doing that, because we've done it really well at times, and then it slides. It'll be interesting to see the next 5 years of Canadians' development system with all the things that are happening. But it still goes back to what Wally taught. I mean, kids and parents need to have a good experience with their kids playing the game, or else they won't play. And that's really what's starting to happen a little bit too much.
Yeah, I've tried to coin down here. I've tried to get people at 10U to understand. If you could have, that in my philosophy on youth hockey is no bridges, no tunnels, no tolls. If we can stay away from that, and we can keep our kids in our buildings, and we can keep our players loving getting up in the morning. Like for instance, my son's not an elite hockey player, 9 years old, my youngest, but he loves hockey. I mean, literally loves it. He'll sit and watch me. He'll sit and watch hockey with me all night. But he's not he's not an elite athlete. But he loves going to the rink. So why? And I just feel that there's thousands of more people and families like that than us crazy people that don't mind getting in the car and going 3 hours for a home game. Like that's
what he is though is a potential fan.
Well, he's just a hockey person, right? It's just somebody in the infrastructure in the infrastructure of hockey. And to me, like the thing that scares parents and families away from our culture, our hockey culture, is this feeling that it's a bunch of crazy people that get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, sit in cold rinks, drinking bad coffee, and then your life's over for 27 weeks of your winter. But that's really the reality is. That doesn't have to be the case, and it shouldn't be the case.
No.
If you choose to be an elite equestrian, yes, it's gonna be crazy what you do. But the regular run-of-the-mill person should be able to get on a horse and ride on the weekend and feel good about that. And I think we get to the point where our only goal for our kids is that we're putting them in a sport to get a scholarship and to play pro hockey. When the reality should be we're putting them in the sport because on Saturday morning you love the fact that they're waiting at the door wanting you to start your car to get to the rink. Like, to me, that's our goal and obligation, but we've lost that. We've lost track, and the rinks and the arena owners and the people that really run these programs have lost the fact that if you truly want to make the most money, and by the way, grow the base of your pyramid to have the best kids, then you got to find a way to get more crazy people into the sport. And the only way to do that is to put them in you just said it. I mean, those 4 C's are great because one of the things we do, right, for mite hockey down here is we have like your first initial run to hockey is you're at the 7:30 a.m. slot on Saturday. And parents are like, what are you, nuts? Like, you'll give that to the Bantams, the one that is, the kids that are already sucked in and not going anywhere, give that slot to them. You can't tell a parent, hey, by the way, your 5-year-old is going to get up kicking and screaming and crying in a cold rink and wet gear at 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh, but we're going to say it's fun, and we're going to show how inspiring it is. I don't get it. I'm like, give those kids the 11 o'clock slot, and that's what the Rangers have actually done with the NHL. They had a girls program last year with 8 girls in it, and they paid for the whole thing. Like the girls paid for the fee, but they supplemented it, so they were able. And now this year they have 37 girls. And next year they'll have 65 girls. So you need somebody to be able to say, how can we secure the 11 a.m. slot? I don't care if one girl signs up. We're gonna pay for it, and we're gonna help grow it. And they've done that. And I think it's a proven model that works. And I think that's where more rinks need to see, the bigger picture. And instead, we go to the lowest common denominator, and that's, why don't we just have less kids and charge them a lot more money? Well, that doesn't grow the game, and it doesn't grow the sport, and it doesn't really give you an opportunity to have lifelong hockey players, right? I mean, how many, and you guys have all probably seen this, and Wally, especially you and Tom, having coached like so many young men that have gone on to play, that have failed to play pro hockey, and women, like, when do they just quit? And they don't even come back to the game anymore. And I think that's where, that's the saddest part, right? That you're looking at players that just get out and they don't come back. And I think that's, maybe until they have kids or something. But I think that's just another obligation we have.
Well, Gary, when we started, I told you we talked on the phone an hour before this call started. And this has to be the most off the wall, every direction, confusing presentation that I don't know anybody will be able to follow and garner anything out of, because it's quite disjointed, but it's all meaningful. I'm just curious, in the light of everything that's going on, all we can do is try to figure out the influence groups of people who are in leadership positions to do some things that can make a difference. And everything you've said is right, Mike. Everything Carrie said that we say, we're preaching to ourselves here, this group. The fundamental problem when I feel there's a chance that mission statement exercise is worth implementing, but if we don't get financial support, and I actually thought some corporate group, like the ones that have withdrawn from Hockey Canada, if you could ever talk to them about this exercise and say they would provide.
Well, yeah, Tom has his hand up.
Yeah. I think we have to state here that the way organizations are put together is totally different in our countries. Like in the US, it's a lot the rink runs teams, where in Europe, it's a club system in most places. And you grow up in that club system and it's all the sports like was mentioned before. And like Calgary, we have these hockey organizations like Trails West and all these kind of things that develop the kids. But then the quadrant system, I guess they're starting Pee-wee now, picks them out of, chooses them in their quarter of the city from these places like Trails West that's developed them. It's totally different than the American system. And like here, we also have, it's like Little League Baseball. You have to play in your area. You can't just go around and play in all kinds of areas. And, like I remember going down to LA helping a guy pick a AAA midget team. He had kids from Chicago trying out for the team. And I think that, Mike, that's pretty common in the States.
Yeah.
But that, doesn't really happen there. And then my grandson's playing in the Saskatchewan Junior League, and like it cost his parents 2 years ago, it was like $15,000 to play for the Royals at the end of the day. But he said that Brooks is just buying all the best players in Canada right now. And they won the Canadian Junior A Championship. So that's a different dynamic there too. So every place, I'm just trying to say, is quite different how it's organized.
Carrie?
Yeah, and Tom, this would be kind of close to your art because, in our city, one of the reasons I got so heavily involved in trying to get funding to the grassroots was because of all the funding we had to come up with, SAIT, Mount Royal, UFC, you live that, right? And, all that, the money, I kept trying to get it to I call them the forgotten five of our city. But it's really the whole system. And, and once you divvy up money, it should become easier, but it really hasn't. You know what I mean? Because there's never enough money to divvy up, and you still got to go do the fundraising. But the point I was going to make about the differentials, our systems are all at not fault, but they're in jeopardy now because the almighty dollar is not dictating equal competition or good leagues. It's the teams that have the most money have the most recruiting, so therefore, and go buy the best players. And in Canada, we have a huge problem because every single level, and I say this about North America, the only league that's probably operated properly now is the NHL because there's a draft and there's rules and then there's a salary cap. But every other league in Canada, teams, and we have so many outlaw leagues. Is that started to happen down in the States? Mike, we like in Canada, we have our minor hockey grassroots system, but we have an equal amount now that are not going through the minor system, their outlaw system, and it's very prevalent today, where a 7-year-old will pay $20,000 to play in the outlaw league.
Oh yeah, it's nuts down here. You'll have teams, full USA Hockey registered teams, and they'll show up to a rink with like these other jerseys, and they'll be playing under a different name for that team, for that league. And then it's just out of control. So what happens is, say if you get suspended from that game, it doesn't affect you in any games. Like it really puts a lot of people at risk, but it also I guess in a way gives a lot of coaches and organizations an opportunity to recruit more kids, because they're saying, well, not only are we going to play the 60 games in this league, we're going to play another 60 games in this other AAU league or outside the league.
So it's
and
rampant,
by the way, you don't have to worry about you also don't have to worry about following these other rules, because we can play in other states and other countries and play for a championship at the end. So I don't know. Like I said, I really don't mind the competition later on, and at 15, 16, 17 years old, just let's build good programs that can attract good kids. But I think at the younger levels, with uneducated parents and influential people that run these programs, it just becomes it just becomes hard to watch on from my point of view. But I have breaking news, so this might be good. This is breaking. Wally doesn't even know yet. So I do a program with the coaches site called the Directors Club, and so we're going to do a 7-part series. And Wally, the first coaches Directors Club series will be the Wally Kosak mission statement exercise. So I'll contact you later on, and the coaches site gets that out to 5,000 or 6,000 members of their organization. And I think it'd be a great, I think to your point, to grassroots this thing and get people to see what this mission statement is and how it's beneficial to kids. I think it's, I know Wally and I have been talking about it back and forth for a while now, but I think it'd be, we'll launch this thing in September and see if we can make an influence on, the organizations that tune in and use it and listen.
Well, Mike, I have to tell you, 6 months ago or so, I talked to Aaron Wilbur.
Yep.
And he said he was going to fly out here and videotape the mission statement exercise process. And I hadn't heard back from him. So I know I did the exercise with them, and it blew them away. They understand the potential.
Yeah.
So if you're actually able to pull this off, because Michael, as you recall, we were scheduling a session with your brick tournament family.
Yeah.
Never happened.
Yeah, they didn't. I think you were scouting or something that weekend, so we couldn't get the times together. But we only had them for a limited time. But I do know that Aaron's going to be up in Calgary for something else as well. So I know he's going to be reaching out to you. But this is more of an opportunity to do a live program and then get people to come on board and actually do the mission statement workshop live with you, which is great. And then we can reconnect with those and then see what kind of an impact we can make in year one.
Well, that's something. Gives me something worthwhile to do. And I'm just looking at a way of getting a governing body to implement it for coaches, that they have to deliver it every year they coach. And as you move up the ladder of certification, you increase the leadership component of that module. And Tim Bothwell's suggestion last week, Carrie, of having an ethical coordinator on every board is more important than having a technical coordinator.
Well, I think you need a balance of both if you want to have a success, to be honest with you. I mean, what do they call them? Ombudsman? Like it's been going on for generations. Governments have people that are kind of, they police what they do. Don't they? What do they call them? Ombudsmen?
Ombudsman.
Something like, yeah. But you're right. Like, I mean, if you walk into a rink and you see what we've had to see on a continual basis, you just go like, come on, like this, like we have all this knowledge, we have all this technology, we have all this, we got to be able to treat our athletes with a little bit more respect than this.
So I'll tell you, related to Kerry's son playing on the midget AAA team last year. I went to a couple games, and I thought they ran the bench pretty well. There were a few things that became cancerous for the team when you look over the course of the team. The best players were staying out too long and getting way more ice time, but not to the point where people would complain. But when they took bad penalties and were rewarded with more ice time, the players know. Like the players know what we're talking about. They know. And they just shake their heads. Kerry, you can tell the story of the player who quit.
Yeah, it was, some of the disappointments that I'm seeing is, so my son played U18 and it was his first year per se. He was 16, and the midget AAA, I call it midget AAA because that's what I believe it is. And, they basically, they had a decent team, and the coach had been known for years of underplaying players and all this stuff. And they'd gone to this power play 1, power play 2, penalty kill 1, penalty kill 2. And basically our leading scorer had been in the organization for, 5 years. And he was our leading scorer on our team, and he wasn't on the first power play unit. And what the first power play unit would do is stay on the ice for 2 minutes. So there was no number 2 power play unit because number 1 stayed on. And this happened all the time. Well, interesting enough, this kid who wasn't on power play 1 became our leading scorer. And so he quit this year, right after the season. And so I had a conversation with his father to ask, because to me, anybody quitting at age 17, and he's a potential guy, he could have played junior A, a good player. And his comments back were interesting. At the end of the year, my wife does this photo kind of album of the whole season, and they asked the kids specific questions. And one of the questions was, what did you enjoy, or what did you think was the most interesting part of this year? And this kid's reply was watching the power play. So our leading scorer on our team watched the power play, and so he was making he was making fun of the fact that the coaching staff didn't even manage the bench properly. So this is the same kid who quit. And so his reasons for quitting at age 17 were he'd spent the last 5 years watching politics and watching this type of behavior from adults, and he just didn't want to do it anymore. And that's an elite program that should know better.
Kerry, can you mention the head coach's first talk to the team? You recall that?
Yeah. He basically, we did it on Zoom. And so I'm sitting in the crowd, and of course, I'm listening to him. And he says, the most important thing that we want to achieve this year is to help these kids develop for junior hockey. And we will do everything in our power to help them move up to the next level. Well, on our U18 team, there's probably only going to be 4 or 5 kids that even play junior. So, watching and listening to him, I just felt like wringing his neck, because really what he said was that, and this is what ended up happening, he centered the team around the 5 kids that were going to be junior players. They got all the extra ice time. They got and then their accountability for taking bad penalties. He didn't make them accountable. So he goes and centers the team around, 5 kids. And, luckily that the rest of the kids kind of bonded together, because even those 5 kids didn't think it was right the way that the coaches were operating. Their excess ice time, cost us, we were a 500 club that should have probably been a an 800 club if properly handled. But, it's just frustrating to sit there as an ethical hockey bench manager, and this is a young fellow. He's not a bad person. He's just got a totally misconstrued way that you should put these teams together. And, but the organization hired him. And the organization hired him because they didn't have credible people who understood how to find the best coaches. But, it's tough to sit and watch, because it would take literally anybody in this group, to solve the issue that our team had. Would have took, a couple conversations with the kids, and then how you manage the bench.
I'm really glad, because we come full circle to where we started. Basically, it got down to managing the bench properly, which you do very well. And that's what you began with. If the elite coach realized shortening the bench isn't the way to build a team to win and create better people, you'll win championships. You will win championships if you manage the bench so everybody earns their roles and discovers their roles through development. And balancing the power play time on the identified 10 power play people didn't happen on that team. And how many of those top 5 people stayed out on 5-on-5 shifts to disrupt the rotation, and a few of them took bad penalties and it was never addressed. Well, this is a cumulative effect on the internal dynamics and culture of the organization, because this is the benchmark team representing the organization. So it's on us, it's on leaders, it's on the board, it's on Hockey Canada, it's on adults.
And of course, one of the bigger issues was, for the kids at that level, they knew that they had a decent amount of players and kids, but the coaches could not lead them down. And I still put the onus on the kids to go out and work hard and do that. But, to underachieve based on your assets and what you have on your team is really what it comes down to. I think, a really good coach finds a way to develop everybody to be a part of the team, so that team plays better as a unit. And I don't know if that's something that's easy to teach, or because what's happened up here in Canada is because of the way elitism has taken over at a young age. You mentioned the brick team there. So we have the same brick teams here, right? So ours would be a provincial brick team. But what's happening is the elitism is seeping in at such a young age. These kids are all growing up and they end up in the universities. Well, when our system was really rocking in a good way, most of the coaching fraternities in our elite programs were ex-university players or people who had dealt with people like Wally. We had a tremendous group of people who came back into the system to then benefit. But now what's happening is this elitism is turning into selfishness, which is turning into they don't come back because to coach. And that's a big problem I've seen happen in the last 20 years, is that we did have a really good process rolling, Wally. So you think of all the hockey schools, you think of all the kids that you coached, they move into the university. Well, all that group came back to be the next generation of coaches. Ken Vingy, myself, Scott Hillier, endless numbers. But now, with the way the systems are all set up, that type of athlete who's getting that type of coaching up to the university level or junior A or junior B or whatever, they're not coming back to be the coaches. Because number one, it's almost what's the word? We've almost become too selfish. with our elite athletes.
Yeah. Michael?
Yeah, I was gonna say we almost have the other problem. We have the players that didn't quite make it, and really just by no fault of the coaching they had, but really just didn't progress through high school, say, or prep school hockey, and they come back and they have their 5 and 6 year old kid, and they're putting them right into these elite hockey programs. I mean, they're building these programs around their kid to give them some experience that they didn't have. And it is unbelievable. Like you watch the parents, and one of the guys that runs a large organization that I work with calls it parental entertainment. Like they're more entertained and they're more into this than the kids are. And I said, what 6-year-old wants to go to the Marriott and sit around the hallway for 7 hours? I don't know a lot that want to do that, but the parents want to go to the bar for 6 hours and know that they went on a tournament and they go back on Monday morning and have some kind of badge of honor that they traveled 1,200 miles in a weekend. It's just an odd thing to see, and I think and I see it more and more often, not the elite players that came through the system, but the players that didn't quite get to an elite level or get to a competitive level, and now trying to kind of resurrect that experience in their own kids.
Michael, I'm sorry that Jordan left because I had one thing in the back of my mind. Carrie, my method of coaching was simple. And when I do a coaching clinic, and it's usually back in the day, novice and Adam were whole ice, U8 and U11. And I would always ask, how many forwards do you have? And quite a few teams carried 8 forwards, not 9. Or they might carry 11, an odd number. Now, I like an even number because you just roll them. And I tried to create the chemistry of lines so everybody starts a period, everybody plays power play, everybody penalty kills. And I run the bench that way. And that's sort of the way I coach. But I've watched minor hockey, and I asked the coaches and what they do with 8 players. You tell me what you think they did, Tim Taylor. 2 centers, 3 sets of wingers. How do they manage the bench?
Say that again, Wally.
Well, you have 8 forwards.
Yep.
And the coaches identify 2 centers, 3 sets of wingers. So what do they do when they run the bench?
Two best players are center ice.
One of those centers is my kid, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you're coaching, you'll.
Yep.
I ask you, how would you manage that bench, Tim Taylor?
At what age level?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah, I would roll them.
Yeah, but rolling them means 2 centers around.
Yeah, but what you can do is 1 to 8.
Yeah, that's not what I would.
You just give them a number.
That's my point. Everybody rolls the wingers, and every second shift they go with the centers. So I bring this up at a coaching clinic, and I said, I'm talking to you. What's wrong with this? Do the minutes. Calculate the dollars. These kids aren't getting fair ice time. You've got to
No,
go.
when I said roll, I mean, line them up, and the player comes off, forward comes off, whether he's a winger or center, and the next one goes on.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Left wingers the first period, 2 left wingers, right wingers the second, and then 2 centers the third, where you might need an opportunity to get a little more ice time to win. No problem. And Gary, that's the way I ran the benches. If I had an odd number, there was an injury, that's what you could do. Now, you did it in a better way because your methodology, and I want to ask Jordan, was the good players got to play with the weaker players quite often. And the good players earned their roles and got power play time. And rolling the lines, like I said, didn't seem to allow them to play with good players often enough.
Well, Tim and Mike, just to so you understand what it was, is that I basically had 4 units. And on the 3rd unit, I would put just 2 kids. So for the first period, unit 1 chemistry line would double shift into 3, all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Then in the second period, you take unit 2, put it in unit 1, and it would double shift in the second period into unit 3. Then in the 4th unit would double shift into and so every period there'd be a different line double shifting. And so it gave me the flexibility that, and it's another reason when you got, say, your chemistry skilled lines, the two of them, and you put them with your foot soldier line, like foot soldiers are still good players. You sometimes just have to teach them a different power play. Maybe it's not the fancy one, or, it's crashing the net a little bit more. But, I had one year where our 3rd line, in theory, had our best power play percentage because they kept it simpler, and sometimes crafty kids will get a little too complex. But at the end of the day, when the parents understand what you're doing, but what's most important about it too is creating the team. The better players, when they understand that having more energy throughout the game, because you're utilizing all 11 skaters, is when you really got a winning team. Because you need those top 3 or 4 players who are going to get more points to really buy in. And how you get them to buy in is that they're going to get their time to double shift. But in the 3rd period, when other teams with 2 lines, they got more energy, and they will actually be more efficient scoring when the other team is getting tired. And that's the nature of the whole thing. And go ahead.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think that's it's something. It's funny because kids don't even get that, right, unless you explain that we can't win the game in the first 8 minutes. We've got to win the game at the end of 60 or whatever, your 45 minutes or whatever it is. So yeah, I'm helping manage you so we can win the game. And it's sometimes, but you're right. They don't see it until they experience it. Sometimes, like, wow, I really felt great in that 3rd period, and that other team was, we scored because we just had more energy, and because 15-year-old kids think they have all the energy in the world, so they don't realize when they're hitting the wall. But Wally, I just remembered why I had so much more time on my vacation, because I had missed these calls. But I have to go. I have to run because I'm supposed to be somewhere 10 minutes ago. But I really appreciate it again jumping on, and I'm gonna touch base with you this afternoon or tomorrow about the date for the mission statement exercise.
Please do, Michael. Please do.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Great convo again. Thanks, guys.
Well, Kerry,
Yeah.
I'm really glad we got a chance to get on. I think if we got on in the future, we might try to narrow it down in a topic and just.
This is great, Wally. We do not need to narrow it.
Tom, what did you think about a lot of the comments? Because I know you've been in the city and you see the challenges, in so many different ways, having been at SAIT and all that stuff. I've always looked at our hockey fraternity as one. And, whether it was the SAIT Trojans or the Forest Heights team or hockey should be one group, really. And to make it better, we need now to go and find a recruiting and a way to create a better coaches development. Like one of the suggestions I made to the Royals organization, we should actually start a coaches academy, because I just don't understand why we're going down this. I understand why, I know why, But this path that we're going down is not a good one.
No, I agree. And I have my own worldwide coaches academy that I have a Facebook page with 7,200 coaches from all over the world following me. And what I did is like with a Finnish coach, we developed the program for Austria.
Yeah.
Once you write something, the game changes or new ideas. So it kind of just goes from there and expands on that. And I don't think, like when it used to be in the Saddle Dome, that development, it was for coaches could go get information and all this kind of stuff. And then Hockey Canada, I guess they're trying to do stuff online to help people, but coaches that, some guy that's going to go coach for some organization, like Trywood or something, they don't get a whole lot of help from anybody. And
what's interesting, Tom, is that I honestly believe that, every USC, every Mount Royal, there's a percentage of those kids that should become the ambassadors of the coaches. So you got to make sure that there's good coaching at every level. I honestly believe our junior B program should be one of the most well-coached groups, because that group of kids are probably more likely to actually come back and help coach at all levels.
Yeah, well, it used to be a really good program, that junior B, when Stu Peppard was running it, and it was a juvenile A's.
Yeah.
But they got rid of juvenile. There's so many guys like Heatley and Duncan and Poffenroth and guys after that went right out of juvenile and they got scholarships, or they played 1 year junior, with the Buffaloes or whatever, and got scholarships. Now that junior B is kind of like guys. My son played 1 year and guys came to practice or didn't come to practice. You know what I mean? It was kind of a.
This is what I recommended to the Calgary area is we got 8 teams that nobody really puts the oomph into. I suggested, for the betterment of the kids, go to 4 teams. Give them good coaches, give them scholarship money to go to university, give them a dressing room, make it a sexy environment, so that you have to go make those teams, because the way it is now is exactly what you said. And so we have kids that are leaving to go play in the KHI in BC because it's an experience. We have kids going to Cochrane, Strathmore. So why wouldn't you join in on creating the sexiness right here, so it was convenient for kids to go to school, which is probably where, which is necessary. And at the end of the day, by the time you get to junior B, you shouldn't even have to pay to play in the organization.
Well, they might even play games against Cochrane and all that.
Yeah.
Because junior B is really big in the small towns.
In the small towns, it's huge. And it's also, it's sexy, and it's you have to go make those teams, and I think what's happened in Calgary is that, the letdown for kids after not making midget AAA, or the midget AAA kid who doesn't make junior. What it comes down to is you want to have, because you think about the kid that plays junior B, they're all good kids. They've gotten to that level.
Yeah.
If they had got solid coaching all the way through the quadrants, they become prime ambassadors to come back and coach in the community levels, and also from the age of, see what happens with the elite guys is from the age of 20 to 25, they're too busy. They're playing university or playing state or whatever. But the junior B guys are just going to school. So if you could help them with their school and they're decent coaches, then, put them into a program so that they can make a difference. We don't do a very good job of grooming our own coaches, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
No, we don't, because, you can coach it, go to a weekend thing, and you don't even really have to pay attention. You have to be there, right? and you get your first certification. And yeah, for sure, we need to do a better job of, like in the club system in Europe, they'll have the best guys coaching the little kids.
The little kids, yeah.
Because that's when you really make, that's when you can really make a difference, is when the brain is way more, can pick up things way better and everything.
Well, and they don't create as many bad habits.
No, well, that's the thing, is if you got the good ones in the first part.
In the first part, which I agree with totally. And I think it's one of the avenues that, having just gone through it, Tom, one of the frustrating things was watching how little the amount of games the young kids were playing, like the ages of 6 to 12, because hockey, I believe it was Hockey Canada, went to this model where they wanted 95% individual skill development,
Yeah.
5% games. Starting
on that, Gary, on that, the way practice is, if you run a drill practice, which most coaches do, you run a drill practice, I'll go and have video of one player, and they've done all kinds of research on this. A drill practice, someone moves between 7 and a really good one, 11 minutes in an hour. So if you play a game with 3 lines, you're getting 15 minutes. Stop time game. It's better to play the game than to stand around in the practices that are no fun.
And it's funner. That's, and going to what Mike said, having more kids within your own organization play against each other versus traveling to Timbuktu,
Well,
I grew up before the quadrant system.
Yeah.
It was just going to start, and I played at Richmond, and we played all the communities around us. And a lot of our dads didn't have cars, and then that George Boothman, he came and he started the first A team. So Gary Unger and I were the same age, and we played the next communities, and we kind of competed for the tiny mite scoring titles. And Unger and he was really small then too. So Boothman, we're practicing at South Calgary Artificial with the tryouts. And I was going because the ice was in before the natural ice. And he kept cutting the small kids, and Unger and I go back to the end of the line, and and neither one of us made the team. And then the outdoor ice started. I started playing at Richmond, and he called me and asked me to come and play. And I said, no, I'm going to stay at Richmond. I don't know if he called me or Unger first, but Unger went, and he got a hat trick first game. Of course, he was there forever. But that was the first A team in Calgary, and they would play in the midget league, the community midget league. And then it started with the Southwest Association. I think the quadrant system started. But right now,
one of the things you should take from that, Tom, is probably the best development that Calgary had going is when there was 50 to 60 communities up until AA.
I really believe that it'd be way better for Trails West and all these communities to keep their kids until they're done Bantam. I don't think, because Bantam's a huge, the size difference is incredible.
Well, I think what should have happened is, you've got to go to individual age brackets. And the problem with the system right now, and the 12 mega communities, we should have never went below 30. There should always been 30, because the evaluation processes are just too tough to deal with. But also, we make it so small at such a young age, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I really believe that, say Trails West went and they have their Div 1 team and Div 2 team or whatever, and and all of these communities, and they develop them, and they have a lot better coaches a lot of the time than the quadrant guys. And
well,
then
what's happened is
when the sizes gets a little more even, then start the quadrant system. That's what I think.
Well, the other thing that's happened is they've negated parent coaches. So if you have hockey acronym, in the communities, they'll let you coach. But when you hit the quadrants, they've all made it a rule you can't coach anymore.
Gary, I want to interrupt both of you, please. I I'm going back, Kerry. We're talking about coaches, and I think your dad did it right. He didn't know anything about hockey, and he arranged games
He
because
just arranged games.
and the mathematics of ice time and puck touches increased. He didn't try to coach you, which means probably misdirect you, thinking he knew what to do and
Yeah.
teach. And you won the cities. So I coached you coming into Bantam, inherited the top two teams, fourth place in November. And I asked him the question, what did you do? And I learned from him, let him have more fun, let him play more games. And I changed my whole philosophy of coaching at that point. So what I'm asking both of you, neither of you does coaching clinics, like teaching certification programs. And Hockey Alberta and Hockey Canada, they provide these 6 zones, these drills, start here, go there. They're not fun. And I think when kids can learn to skate, handle a puck, they might pass a little bit, but they can play a game without falling down.
Yeah.
I think coaches should play more games.
They should play more games.
And pat them on the back sooner than later at any level.
Well, and Tom,
But
the
you
other
also
part of the
implement
equation.
in your practice too.
Yeah.
You
But
have
Tom, here's the other part of the equation too, is we also grew up on outdoor ice where we would go spend X amount against different age brackets of kids. And you would
Yeah.
spend those 8 hours even over and above the games you played, you know? So that I constitute as shinny or whatever the game is. But when the outdoor ice kind of became less and less, I think we took a big hit and we just didn't make, the right adjustments as a community. I think we needed to continually make more outdoor ice and get kids out playing more shinny. But Tom, this is a true story, and I've told it to Wally. But one of the reasons why my dad just played games was we had a practice early in the season, and it was at the bubble in that red and white thing on 52nd. It was the only ice time we could get was like 5:30 in the morning on Sunday. So he used to go around and pick everybody up and take them to the rink. And we were practicing, and one of the kids took a shot, and he hit my dad in the head, and blood started to come out of his toque. And so after the practice, he takes us aside, and we're in the dressing room. It's early in the year, and he says, "What do you guys think? Do you guys like practice?" Because he had a headache and he was bleeding, and we all said, "No, we just like to play games." I said, "Okay." And we never had another practice that year. Played 148 games, and that's the story that Wally tells. But it was precipitated because he tried to have a practice, got hit in the head. Something told him that we didn't want to practice, so we played, and every year it was like that. So it's fun stories.
But I had the hockey. I was teaching at Bishop Kidd, and Kenny Vanjie was there, and we had this really unique program that half the day was options. So 3 times a week I had a hockey class. We'd take the bus to an arena and we just played. And I just played. We just played shinny. We never did a drill ever. And so I'm coaching Sade in the mid 80s. And we're playing an exhibition game against UFC. And both captains, Vinji and Randy Normandeau, were from my hockey class. Because we just played and they both could handle a puck and make plays. And
like, it'd be interesting today, because I would still do this today, but if I could even get accreditation as a coach, because back in Wally's day, when he lightened up a little bit on the drills, he created shinny hockey. And what, you got to the ice, and we usually could get there before him. The rule was, you just put the puck in the center and you divvy them up and you just start playing shinny, forwards versus D, Catholics versus Protestants, whatever it was. Well, my whole career of coaching, I implemented that into the start of every practice, Tom. because of the nature of the ice times at Renfrew and Henry Viney. You know, they would start at 4, and a lot of times kids couldn't get there till 4:15. But most of the kids that I talked to today, what they remember the most about our practices is what we called river hockey, and the competition. And I used to run that for anywhere from 10 minutes to a half hour, the start of every practice. And there was only 3 rules. You had to compete, you had to move the puck, and you had to, I should say, support the puck and play the puck and just play hockey, right? But it's, you know, these are things that, you know, like I said, we're talking to the, you know, the people who believe that. And so I'm not sure why it's gotten so off the rails. I mean, it's just the way it is now. But anyways, I should probably go answer some questions around here. I've certainly enjoyed it. I'm going to try and make sure I get on every Thursday. I have to learn how to get on through Skype, or you just got to send me a link.
I think I'll just send you the link. I should have sent it to you last night.
Is Sammy Joe the type of person who'd like to be the queen of Hockey Canada?
No, she's married to Billy Bridges, has 2 daughters. Billy Bridges is the leading scorer in 4 Olympics with the sledge hockey team.
Oh, okay.
And so she mentioned that Ken Babby has left the organization. When we hang up here, I'm going to phone him. But anyway, I want to thank both of you. It was a heck of a talk. I have no idea how I would edit it. I find I wrote 9 pages of notes during the course of this. So what I do, Carrie, is I start listening from the top down, and I'll take out maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, post it. But the very first thing I do when we're done is I download the whole thing and I send the whole thing out. There's nothing I think we have to be sensitive about in terms of mentioning names. Like you and I had talked this morning, and there were stories we wanted to talk about, the entitlement and some of the young kids growing up that were entitled when you were in Adam and Pee Wee, and they came up and played with you, and it was a problem overall. And it hurt them growing up, I think, and hurt them in social development and everything.
There's one thing I wanted to mention too to you guys is that, like, this whole process of gaining more funding for proper things is really what the whole 50-50 and the progressive's been about. So the Calgary Canucks just changed their colors to Flames colors, red and gold, and I'm not sure if you've seen that. And of course, it's tradition, but really what is in behind it is, I think, I've always tried to get through to the Flames that they should be the major sponsor of a lot of these programs, and putting large amounts of dollars into what I call the Forgotten Five, Tom. And the Forgotten Five in the city is our universities and our colleges and our juniors. Well, you can start throwing in the quadrants and the communities. And so to try and get money to filter down, but once again, the money's got to get used properly. So that's one of the reasons the change of the color happened with the Calgary Canucks, is because we're not looking, but the board of the Canucks is, and I'm pushing it from the outside to try and get like $100,000. Like, to me, that's the whole reason that was put together, Wally, years ago.
Yeah.
Was to try and get more funding so that the USC could compete better against the U of A, because it's a recruiting thing, the Mustangs, the Canucks. And so it's been a frustrating time watching the coaching end of it, but it's also been a battle to try and get, more funding, because you guys know, like, the funding, and that's where Hockey Canada, to see the numbers of people that go to these championships, and Wally, you know what I'm talking about, because you didn't go to, was it Turin one time because it was so overloaded with people? Was that the Olympics? Was it the Turin one that you mentioned you didn't go to, even though you put the, and you told me their there was 20 people already going that, to the Olympics, and you just felt it was crowded. And, I went to that U18 in Russia with Courtney, and there was 19 people stepping on that ice that didn't have skates on. Well, that's $250,000, Wally. How many people is necessary to take a team? 6 or 8?
Yeah.
19?
Well, Terry, I'll tell you.
That's where Hockey Canada, I think, is also going to look.
They know what they're doing with those camps, because they're talking about, and I hate the word, it's the best of the best, giving them the best support. You never had sports psychologists, professional trainers back in our day, therapy people. Those people are traveling with the team and part of the culture of a team. One of the
Don't you think that the backlash, like if you audited,
well, I'm just saying the results, the impact of it on the development. On the female side now, the culture is healthy. On the male side, I don't think the culture is as healthy. So I wouldn't criticize what they're doing. Financially, it's demanding, but it's the best of the best. And I think they deserve the sports scientists, psychologists.
Well, I'm not saying they don't. What I'm saying to you, Wally, is if they're the governing body of Canada, could they not be a little bit better in how they throw the money around? Should it not go to more of the grassroots programs?
Well, I don't think Hockey Canada.
They get a carte blanche to put checks. I just
matter who they give money to. It's what you do when you get it. I know the money that they're putting into that level of competition and the development of those girls from U16 on in the provinces, and then they get to the national team, is worthwhile for the elite group of girls.
But do you think it's worthwhile to take 19 bodies to Russia and waste $250,000?
No, I don't think it's a waste. No.
So you think that it takes 19 people to make that team, and they got a bronze anyways, but I mean, it just, see, I come from it being a sponsor and being a fundraiser, and how hard it is.
I've been both, and I've seen both. And back in my day, the first 2002, we had 6 people with us. And that amount grew. But we had a sports psychologist, a physiotherapist, a trainer. We had a logistics person, because the logistics of looking after meals and hotels, there's a lot of work to carry.
I understand that, Wally, but I also like it doesn't take 19.
Well, you can't comment until you walk in their shoes.
Well, the Olympics that you won 46-2, and you didn't go because there was too many people there. Those are the things that, in an underlying fashion, that's still usage of money and proper development. I'm not saying they shouldn't be treated.
The reason I didn't go, I could have, is I didn't want to distract anybody being there. I've already been to the Olympics. It's just a big show. I've lived through it 2 times. But everybody else that went, they had a job to do when they went there. I know how busy Julie Healy was looking after logistics. And I know the people that went there, they were busy, and it was time well spent. The athletes were given all the help they needed. You're not just talking about hockey players here, minor hockey players. You're talking about athletes that are developing to be the best they can be. physically, mentally. And it takes that many people, I guarantee you. And I wouldn't criticize that cost.
So when the NHL player goes, it takes that many?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When they have the World NHL team,
Yeah.
you want to know the cost? If they pay,
No, the amount of people to manage.
of course. And they pay the cost of all their families to come.
I understand that, but they've also gotten there on the backs of plenty of people that have fundraised for their benefit. So an NHL player, to me, should actually pay for his own family, to be honest with you, even though they're not getting paid.
Well,
because they're all making 10 million a year.
This is why we can't solve the problem in hockey, Kerry. You've got your ideas. I've got mine. Tom's got his. And at some point, somebody's got to make a decision, and it's never going to be right. That's why we can't do something that's common sense.
Yeah.
It's harder to understand common sense at an elite level than it is at minor hockey. We've lost it in minor hockey, that's for sure. Anyway, I got to go.
All right.
Barry, thank you for coming on. Glad we had you. Tom, thanks for hanging in there again. I
want to actively come on like every week. So just, I like listening to stuff. So.
Okay. Well,
I enjoyed this session.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye. Bye.